We're good to go.
All right. I will now call to order the December 7th, 2022 meeting of the Nevada Local Justice Reinvestment Coordinating Council. Good afternoon to everyone. Good to see all of you. It's been a while since August. I want to welcome all those who are viewing this meeting on the Department of Sentencing Policy's YouTube channel. This is the fifth meeting of our 2021-2023 meeting cycle. I will now ask Director Gonzalez to take roll.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Art Clark. Mr. Jeff Clark.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Dahl. I will know I can visually see Mr. Dahl and mark him here present. Mr. Frainer.
Present.
Ms. Hilton.
Present.
Mr. Hip. Ms. Ingram.
Present.
Mr. Levin.
Present.
Ms. Murray.
Present.
Ms. Rowley.
Present.
Mr. Sadler.
Present.
Mr. Schlepp. Mr. Sagerblum.
Here.
Mr. Shields. Mr. Zenz.
Here.
Vice Chair Byrd.
Present.
Chair Pruitt.
Present.
Chair, we have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. We will now move to agenda item number 2, which is our first period of public comment. As always, there are 2 periods of public comment, one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end. Members of the public have 2 options for submitting public comment. First, members of the public may do so in writing by emailing the Department of Sentencing Policy at sentencingpolicy@ndsp.nv.gov. Public comment received in writing will be provided to the council and be included by reference in the minutes of the meeting. Members of the public who wish to testify may do so by telephone. Due to time constraints, public comment will be limited to 2 minutes. Any member of the public that exceeds the 2-minute limit may submit your comments in writing to the Department of Sentencing Policy. At this time, I will ask staff to manage and direct those who wish to testify by telephone. Mr. Sepulveda.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the public who would like to testify by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. When it's your turn to speak, please slowly state and spell your first and last name. Chair, we currently don't have any callers.
Excellent, thank you. That will take us right into item number 3, which is approval of minutes. Members of the council have been provided with copies of the minutes from the August 3rd, 2022 meeting. At this time, I would like to know if there are any edits, comments, or corrections that anyone from this group would like to make. All right, at this time, seeing no requests for edits, comments, or corrections, I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the August 3rd, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve. Oh, sorry. Second,
Okay.
whoever.
We have a motion and a second. Director Gonzalez, did you get the names for those?
It looks like I have Mr. Sadler for the first and Ms. Murray for the second.
Excellent.
Well, hold on a second.
Oh.
It wasn't me, but
Oh,
I'd
wasn't
be
it?
happy to do it. Just so everybody knows. I
right.
figured somebody else was
It was
going to
me,
say it,
but
so
I
it
don't-
wasn't me.
It
Good,
was
Mr.
me,
I'll put
but I
Mr.
don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear
We
me?
can hear you now. So I'll put Mr.
Okay.
Dahl for the first and then Ms. Murray
Yes.
for the second. Thank you so
There we
much for
go.
everyone's enthusiasm.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor of the adoption of the minutes as they're set forth, please indicate.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. I will now open agenda item number 4. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. As you know, in some of our past meetings, we've been short on people, which obviously makes the business we have to conduct a little more difficult. I know that each of you have very busy jobs that press on your time. So I did really want to thank you for that. We were able to accomplish a good number of things at our last meeting, despite not having a quorum. Obviously, we're There's some minutes we will need to approve. We'll include those in our next meeting from our meeting prior to August, and we will address those there. But I do want to thank each of you. If any of you have a counterpart who is not present today, I would invite each of you to reach out to that person if you know who they are, as designated from your county, to admonish them to come and take part and be part of these meetings so that we can continue to accomplish the work that the legislature set out for us to do. So like I said, I want to thank you for accepting your appointments and for everything that you've done. This will move us to agenda item number 5, which is our update on the request for the appropriation of grants. At our last meeting, we finalized our recommendation to the Nevada Sentencing Commission to recommend an appropriation of funds for grants that will enable us to fulfill our statutory mandate. Director Gonzalez presented our recommendation to the Nevada Sentencing Commission. I will now turn the time over to her to provide us with an update on what happened at the August 24th Sentencing Commission meeting. Director Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair stated, I presented to the Commission this recommendation. What I presented was that the Council finalized a recommendation to request an appropriation of $3 million for this Council to administer grants to local governments and nonprofits for programs and treatments that will reduce recidivism. I summarized the presentations and discussions that the Council had at our quarterly appropriation. Had at our quarterly meetings to develop this recommendation. I informed the Commission that to get this appropriation, our department would request $3 million as a one-shot appropriation to our budget. One member of the Commission asked if the appropriation would be the only source for funding for the grants. I informed them that the statute provides the grants must be funded from the general fund. So yes, if funded, the appropriation would be and can be the only source for the grants. Another member of the Commission asked if the request could go to the Council and then to the Commission for approval. I clarified that the Council oversees the grants, so the Commission would not be involved in approving those grants. Another member of the Commission asked about the criteria for the grants. I told the Commission that the criteria has not been developed yet, but will be one of the next projects that this Council will work on. We will solicit presentations for this Council to learn more about how to administer grants and how to develop criteria. I'm happy to report that after this discussion, the Commission unanimously approved the recommendation. So the next step for us will be to track this request through the budget and legislative process. That concludes my update. I will now turn the time back over to the Chair.
Thank you for the update. Are there any questions that any of the council members have for Director Gonzalez about the update? All right, I'm seeing no raised hands or all ranks remain muted. So that will close this agenda item. That will take us to agenda item number 6, which is the presentation on justice counts. Recently, the Nevada Sentencing Commission approved for staff at the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy to pursue becoming a founding state of the Justice Counts effort. Justice Counts brings criminal justice data together to assist policymakers in making data-driven policy recommendations. If Nevada becomes a founding state, we will receive technical assistance to collect criminal justice data to assist us in our participation. Our staff at NDSP will oversee justice counts in our state and use it as one of our many tools to collect and aggregate criminal justice data. As you know, this coordinating council has made its own effort to collect data starting with our local county jails. Director Gonzalez thinks that justice counts will help us in the collection of this data. So she recommended that the technical providers for justice counts make a presentation so that we can learn more about the effort and how agencies in the counties we represent can participate. I will now turn the time over to the Justice Counts team.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Victoria Gonzalez, I will start off the presentation by introducing our Justice Counts team. I just wanted to tell this council, I'm very excited to share this information about Justice Counts. They are here because we think it will help in our data collection efforts, as the Chair mentioned. We, as NDSP, reached out to the Justice Counts teams and requested on behalf of NDSP and the Sentencing Commission that we become a founding state, which would allow us to get technical assistance to help us participate in the effort. I will now turn the time over to the Justice Counts team for them to introduce themselves and the preliminary efforts of the project. And then later on our presentation, I will talk more about what our partnership will look like.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Thank you, Chair Pruitt. Thank you to the council. Good afternoon. My name is Maddie Roman Scott. I'm a project manager working on the Justice Counts Initiative. Thank you for your time and space to talk to you this afternoon. We're thrilled to be a part of the discussion today and to be a part of Nevada's efforts as a founding state with the Justice Counts Initiative. Before we begin, I wanted to introduce my colleague, Katie. You can introduce yourself really quickly.
Hey everyone, thanks for having us. My name is Katie Moshauer. I'm a program director for Justice Counts at the Council of State Governments Justice Center.
All right, thank you, Katie. All right, so Justice Counts. Justice Counts is an approach that supports agencies in sharing the data they already have in one easy to access location and an easy to understand format. These tools help agencies like yourselves tell the story of their work, their success to policymakers, and shed light on important and often misunderstood work that criminal justice agencies like yourselves do every day. Slide. One more. So here's a high-level overview of what we will cover in our brief discussion today. We're going to talk about who we are. We're going to talk about the problem that Justice Counts addresses. We'll cover the origins of Justice Counts, including the challenge that the initiative seeks to help state and local criminal justice leaders address. We're going to talk about how we're doing it, and then we'll wrap up with questions that you might have. So Justice Counts is co-led by the United States Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance, BJA, and the Council of State Governments Justice Center. BJA is a division of the United States Department of Justice under the umbrella of the OJP, which is the Office of Justice Programs. BJA lives alongside the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institutes of Justice, and other similar entities. BJA and its sister agencies fund a myriad of programs and initiatives that provide resources and tools for state and local criminal justice leaders. This project has been around for over 2 years, since the beginning of 2020. It's a long time coming. Unlike other BJA-funded initiatives, Justice Counts does not have an explicit policy focus. It does not culminate in the development of a policy package for each participating state or jurisdiction. Rather, Justice Counts is a platform to help local and state agencies, governments, and other relevant stakeholders adopt a data-driven approach to criminal justice policy and budget decisions. Justice Counts is overseen by a 26-member national steering committee. This committee is made up of policymakers, agency leaders, and criminal justice stakeholders from 21 different states. They have vast experience and expertise from across the criminal justice spectrum and includes policymakers from all chambers of government from across the country. The National Steering Committee meets regularly to provide high-level guidance and direction for this initiative. Finally, Justice Counts is backed, as you see here, by a coalition of 21 national partners that provide general and specific subject matter expertise, technical assistance and support, and much more. 14 of the 21 are national associations whose members play vital roles in each segment of the criminal justice system. Stakeholder associations include folks like the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the National Sheriff's Association, the National District Attorneys Association, National Legal Aid and Defender Association, AJA, the American Jail Association, APBA, American Probation and Parole Association. I'm not going to read all of them, I promise. Policymaker-focused associations as well, such as the National Governors Association, the National Criminal Justice Association, and others that play a vital role. So essentially, every national association that covers each sector of the criminal justice system, from law enforcement to prosecution, defense, supervision, and research. Of the 21, 7 are partner and national research providers, technical assistance, or technology providers with vast expertise and knowledge of the criminal justice data management systems, metrics, measures, and much more. This includes our partners over at the Measures for Justice, Recidiviz, the RAND Corporation, Justice Management Institute, and others. And now I will hand it over to Director Gonzalez.
Thank you. For the record, Victoria Gonzalez. Over a year ago, my staff and I heard a presentation from the Council of State Governments about Justice Counts. Its goals aligned with ours, so we looked into it. We attended additional webinars and learned that it is something that we think would help with our mandate. Next slide. We know that the criminal justice agencies in Nevada collect useful data, But one of the things that I've realized is by being in this position, and that it's not all in one place, as many of you know, and it's not in a place where it can be utilized by the public and policymakers. Our agency, the Nevada Department of Sentencing, sorry, the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy exists because of this need for data, this need to have data in one place where it can be used to make recommendations. Since we were established in 2019, we have been working to collect data and put it all in one place where it can be useful. Next slide. Justice Counts is another tool in our toolbox that we hope we can use to advance our statutory mandate and help us organize and present data and help tell the story of the work behind all of that data. Next slide, please. Our intent here is for our agency, the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy, to be oversight for Justice Counts in Nevada. It will help us share data that is already being collected and frequently requested. We've already been able to help in streamlining those requests and redirecting the public, policymakers, lawmakers to our agency to get the data they need to make recommendations. And so what we're hoping is that Justice Counts will continue to help us, and we, again, be the oversight for that and helping all the agencies have all of this information in one place. I'll now turn the time back over to Justice Counts.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. Justice Counts consists of 4 interrelated components designed to help participating agencies and governments better assess and use criminal justice data. This includes generating consensus-driven criminal justice metrics. Making the most of criminal justice data requires some direction, consistency, and agreement on what we're trying to measure and assess. To that end, Justice Counts brought together leaders from across the system to identify and refine these metrics. We'll talk about that in a minute. In order to make those metrics a reality for agencies and policymakers, we are deploying an advanced suite of tools and resources to facilitate agencies sharing those metrics. In a few moments, Katie will explore what those tools and resources look like, how they work, and more. And then finally, we are directly assisting participating states, sites, and agencies in implementing this framework. We are currently working with Director Gonzalez and her staff. On the other side of the same coin, we're helping policymakers, agency leaders, and the public effectively understand and leverage how these new data and resources to inform policymakers. So how did we do it? 7 subcommittees were formed to develop the metrics. Working within a given framework, and we'll talk about that in a minute, over the course of more than a year, each had identified a core set of metrics for their sector of the system. Those sectors are law enforcement, prosecution, defense, courts and pretrial agencies, jails, prisons, and community supervision. These sectors make up one side of the framework for the metric, and 6 categories of measurement make up the other. In identifying the metrics, Justice Counts leaders and partners applied a dual test. One, is this metric feasible for most agencies in that specific sector to complete? So basically, does the data exist? Are they common? Even for smaller agencies, can the data be extracted, counted, or entered in a reasonable way? The second part of the test is utility. Are these data really useful and informative to policymakers and agency leaders? Do they tell you something meaningful or comparable? If a proposed metric didn't meet these 2 tests, the metric was not advanced. So here are the 6 categories, if you see here. So capacity and cost, population movements, operation and dynamics, public safety, equity, and fairness. So for each of the categories, for each metric, those are the questions that were asked. The metrics are structured by category, and each is designed to help policymakers, agency leaders, and the public answer key questions. Next slide. These categories and questions were identified and vetted by the National Steering Committee, who drove the development of the metrics. Once the metrics were developed, they were reviewed and approved. Next slide. You see here for population movements, it goes all the way down for each sector, and then for the sector, each of the categories. Next slide. Here we see the result of the work from the National Steering Committee, which is the Tier 1 metrics, which were released publicly back in April. The Tier 1 metrics are those that met the dual test that we talked about earlier, which is utility and feasibility. mentioned before. And in total, I think they started off with 2,100 metrics. We ended up with 67. Pretty soon, we're going to end up releasing the technical implementation guides per sector for those metrics that will provide guidance on the definition, which is customizable for each participating agency. We should have those in hand within the next few weeks. The second tier of metrics that is more comprehensive, but might be more challenging for smaller agencies or for those with less research or data related capacity, that should be released sometime in early spring. Next slide. So once agencies are ready to begin the process, what you see on their screen now is just a sample of a self-assessment. We have a self-assessment tool on our website that agencies can complete. Nevada agencies that have completed the self-assessment thus far, as you see, can share over 80% of their tier 1 metrics. And now I will pass the baton to Katie.
All right, thank you very much, Maddie. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the suite of tools that Maddie mentioned a little bit earlier. One thing that we did when we started this project was really to review existing data efforts within the criminal justice field and figure out what worked and what didn't work for efforts that preceded us. That's really where we got the idea that consensus-driven metrics were so important that if folks don't agree on what they should be sharing, it really all kind of doesn't move forward. So we've got that important foundational brick in place. The next thing we really learned was that agencies need a way to share the data that is not, reliant on an individual data system that maybe some people have, but not others, et cetera. So we really spent a fair amount of time figuring out how to assist agencies in sharing these key metrics. So we call this the digital infrastructure. Oh, it's moving on my screen. I wasn't expecting that. That is kind of the overarching term for these tools. And there's two really important things that the digital infrastructure empowers agencies to do. And the first is they can choose which metrics that they are going to share data for. You saw that about 80% of metrics seem feasible for agencies. That means that for that 20% that aren't actually within scope right now, you can just turn those off, easy peasy, no problem. Also means that we want to make sure you can define what the metric means for an individual agency. We know that's a big challenge in that maybe an agency in one part of the state does not define something the same way as another part of the state or even in a different state. So we wanted to make sure that we could meet agencies where they were so that they could make the most of the data they currently have in the way they currently have it. So I'm going to toggle over to a demo of what the publisher tool looks like. I can't see you all anymore, but I do welcome folks to just pipe up with questions or things you'd like to know more about as we go. This can definitely be more conversational than me monologuing at you. So feel free to just jump in at any points. So we wanted to walk you through a little bit of the construct of how we've been thinking that this will work for agencies. So this is the main portal that agencies can use to first configure and ultimately publish metrics for justice counts. So metric configuration is an incredibly critical part of the process. So we're going to pretend that I'm a DOC and that I'm running a prison and that I'm going to configure some metrics and just walk you through how you can share them out. So if I click on admissions, one of the first things I see is this pivotal question: are you able to share any part of this metric? And if I were to say, no, that's not within my capacity right now, if I went back to metrics, you can see it's grayed out. So we want to make sure that it's really easy for agencies to self-select what's appropriate for them and then get everything else out of your way so that it's not something that you have to kind of continually run into a prompt for something that you're not able to do at this time. But let's assume that, yes, I am able to share information on an admission. This screen is broken down into kind of two parts. So the left side of the screen talks about the actual numbers that you will share with justice counts. And the right side of the screen is a description. You can think of it about that's the recipe that goes into admissions. So everything on the right is not asking for a disaggregation or an individual number. You're simply describing what is or is not included in the number you provide as an admission. So when I click here, this is basically my menu for possibly what my admissions to my prison include. So I can read through the list and I'm like, yep, people with new prison sentences come into my prison. Yes, people on a board hold, but maybe folks who are serving probation sentences do not come into my prison. Maybe they go to jails in my state. So I can simply click off anything related to probation because it's not relevant to me and my state. And so there's a fairly extensive list But you can see here, all of these have available toggles. There's also an additional context piece where if there's something that's really critical about my agency that isn't in this list, but you need to know for this to be an accurate representation of my experience, I can type it into this list here. So similarly, there are breakdowns for admissions happening over here. So maybe I want to add some additional detail to my admissions metric, but you know what, maybe I don't actually track public order, other, or unknown. I can choose just to share data disaggregated by these 3 types. And there's a similar way that you can select the definition for each of those as well. The default right now is set up to mirror NIBRs, but we know that not every state, we know actually that your state in particular, does not actually do the classifications in the exact same way. So this is another area where you could really come through and customize and give a nice explanation of what is important and included in your data. So the initial onboarding process, CSG Justice Center helps everybody do this process because it is really critical. Once this has happened, and say I'm done configuring my admissions and I'm ready to actually share some data, I would come up to the record section. Let's go to December. So this is an example of a manual data entry screen. And I can say, you know, type in my admissions, you know, this month. And so you can see that the breakdowns that I selected not to include are grayed out. So again, they're not going to ask me for things that I can't provide for them. And I can simply type in my numbers. I can save this as a draft if I want someone else in my agency to look at it before I publish. I can review and publish, or maybe I need to phone a friend and get a little bit of help here. Conversely, I know what a lot of folks will do is actually do more bulk exports that NDSP can then upload on your behalf. So there's a whole segment of Publisher that also explains how to code a query so that it can be uploaded automatically and very easily. So this is something that we also are doing some hands-on help with agencies so that they can construct these queries so that the ongoing work of continuing to submit data through Justice Counts is as minimal as possible. So every time someone actually hits publish, this goes right to a public-facing dashboard, which we are still working on, but there's also these little dashboard tools within Publisher so that you can really see, I have not actually published data through my fake account here, but you'll be able to see a trend. This is a great check and balance before data is published because you could see like, wait, something doubled, this doesn't look right, let's go check our numbers. It's just another tool to help kind of see where things are going and if it really seems right to the agency. Within this, you can also disaggregate by those, you know, particular offense types or by percentages versus numbers, a lot of different ways to see things as just an extra little helper for agencies as they share out data. Now, up here in agencies, I have access to all the different kinds of agencies, and we know NDSP as the leader of this initiative in your state will actually have access to be able to share data on behalf of agencies as well. So they'll have a really robust list where they can help and support and share data that they have access to again, help minimize the workload for agencies. All right, now I can't see folks. Before I toggle back to the presentation, would anyone like to ask any questions or dig in deeper on any of these topics? Okay, so back we go to PowerPoint. And this is an example, it's a sample of what a data visualization might look like. We wanted to just show that they're very simple. We want to summarize what each visualization is showing so that there's no guessing of, oh, it looks like admissions had this many, it changed this much. And importantly, this little gray text at the bottom is how all of those lists of, yes, it includes this, doesn't include that, will end up being displayed. So for example, for Stars Hollow County, you know, maybe they do not actually include paper bookings in their admission or readmission figures. So that would be an important thing to know when looking across jail systems, that what's included in their figure might be very different than someone who does include paper bookings, as there's quite a number of those. So this is one of the ways that we're working to ensure that there is an accurate and fair representation of data and that agencies can learn a lot about who is comparable to them and the way that they do things. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it back to Maddie.
Actually, we're going to pass it back to Director Gonzalez.
Apologies.
No worries. Next slide, please.
So what will happen, for the record, Victoria Gonzalez, so what will happen when an agency decides to participate in Justice Counts? You'll complete an opt-in form, which we'll talk about at the end of our presentation. And once this opt-in form is submitted, what this does is, you can see from this visual, it unlocks the orientation. And the orientation is conducted with staff from the Nevada Department of Sentencing Policy and Justice Counts. We do everything side by side with this. So we will all be working together. And so once again, you complete the opt-in form, we will schedule an orientation with the agency and with who you think might need to be involved. And then at that orientation, we will identify key staff and what their roles will be in participating in Justice Counts, identifying what role do you want NDSP to play in far as supporting the agency in getting Justice Counts implemented for your agency. And then you can see, then we'll open that orientation, will then open it up to the ongoing technical assistance to actually onboard your agency and participate. So I will turn the time back over to Justice Council to talk more about those steps.
Sure thing. We wanted to start by just demystifying the opt-in form. We wanted to make it as easy as possible to sign up and sign on to Justice Counts from the agency perspective. So this is the actual opt-in form. It just goes simply through what the data is used for, that agencies retain ownership of the data, and that an agency can choose to change or remove data or stop participation in the program at any time. And then we just collect some basic information of a key contact from the agency. And then also, we know that some agencies do share data for multiple sectors. So someone, if they had a unified system, could select all of these and then sign their name and submit, and we would reach out and make sure that we start configuring for everything that's appropriate for the agency that has these three sectors under their umbrella. So I think that brings us to questions. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I can see you all again, but we'd love to hear what else would be helpful to share about Justice Counts.
And before we do that, if I just offer a couple of remarks as to, so what will happen next is at the end of this, later today, we're going to send out an email to the members of the Coordinating Council with a link to the opt-in form. What we're asking of the Coordinating Council is, we have a mix of a membership here as far as where you, what your role is in the criminal justice system. And so we're asking for those of you who are one of these sectors, here's information. We're asking for your participation and explaining what that would look like. For those of you that represent your county on a higher level, we're asking you to take this information back to the criminal justice sectors in your county and share this information. The completeness of Justice Counts, Justice Counts doesn't work unless we have everybody participating, because the idea is to get a complete picture of what's happening in our state. And so just so you know what the ask is of this, and what that way you know too what we're working on is, the chair mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, we have started our own effort to collect jail data, which you were all very helpful in getting those surveys out and those to your stakeholders and getting that information back to us. And that's been part of our foundation in working towards getting this information. And this is the next step, I'm hoping, for what we can do with that information and getting all that that data in one place. I also wanted to emphasize that Justice Counts uses aggregated data. The data that we'd be asking you to submit is not offender level or case level data, it's at the aggregated level. And in relation to that, what we're hoping and thinking makes sense is that you're reporting data you're already reporting to other entities for different purposes. The idea is not to have you have to create and designate a data person that didn't exist before to help us with this effort. The idea is to take what I had mentioned at the top of our presentation. I know the data is already out there. There's some very useful data. We're just trying to get it all in one place. And so I think an important thing is just bringing everyone together and hearing what data do you have? And you can see how customizable it is. If you don't have the information, you don't need to report it. Our hope is just to get it all in one place and we can adjust the information as you're able to report it. And also, if for some reason a system change happens or you end up getting additional staff, we can then toggle those data reporting pieces back on and you can start reporting something that you weren't able to report before and show the process of that. A couple other things I wanted to mention is Nevada's the first in the Justice Counts effort. This is brand new. And because of our willingness to just say, let's try this and see what happens, Nevada is the first in participating in this. And so some of the questions we received is, well, what are other states doing? They haven't done it yet. And so I'm really excited about Nevada being the leader in this, because I think if we participate and we get our stakeholders together, we're going to be able to formulate and give input that's going to be very valuable for other states. As Justice Counts goes and gets other states to participate, there'll be other, we've already been there. We were there first, and we'll be able to help and address some of those issues that may come up. When these dashboards are all up and running, you'll be able to see data from all over the country, not just Nevada, and it's all in one place. Not only is our data in one place, but so is data from other states. And I know for some policymakers, that's important when it comes to making decisions, is doing that comparison. We'd also be able to see what other people's definitions look like, what they're including and not including in their data. And then I wanted to let you know where we're at right now. So you saw the sectors that are listed as far as criminal justice agencies. I'm going to be making another presentation to the Sentencing Commission next week about where we are at. I wanted to let you know the sectors that are we already have participants in are from the defense sector. The Washoe Public Defender has opted in, and we're working on their orientation soon. In the law enforcement sector, a recent development that we have is we've been working with the Central Repository. And we realized there may be a way to take the NIBRS data that you're already reporting from your law enforcement agencies and utilizing that and be able to upload that. So again, we don't want to duplicate efforts. And I appreciate the stakeholders who gave us that idea to go and start looking into that. And so that's going to be a great place to start. If you're a law enforcement agency, it's not going to be at the beginning. We're going to take the data you're already reporting to NIBRS and then just look for what you can supplement in addition to we can already get from NIBRS. But under the law enforcement sector, the Washoe County Sheriff has also opted in, and we're working towards scheduling their orientation. Under the jail sector, again, Washoe County Sheriff opted in as a participant in getting the jail data. Nevada Department of Corrections has opted in. We've started their orientation along with the Nevada Division of Parole and Probation. So what we're looking for from the council here is those sectors where are more local and focused locally, and where we're looking to get data. And maybe it's just having a conversation about what your ideas are for getting data from these sectors. So based on the update I just gave you, you've noticed that we don't have any participants from prosecution, from the courts, and we do need more jail data participants. And I think that is going to be a tricky part, and we need those conversations to figure out how we're going to do that. But again, we'd be looking at what data are you already reporting and how can we get it all in one place. And so with that, I just wanted to again emphasize like how excited we are about this effort and how it's really, I'm hoping to work towards our statutory mandate to help this council when it comes to having the data in one place for your counties, and working towards then making better recommendations with that data. And so with that, I'll conclude and now turn it over to the chair to field questions and any other comments in regards to this effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Gonzalez. And I see Mr. Clark raised his hand a few times. What's your question or comment, Mr. Clark?
I would just like to throw out there and ask Director Gonzalez, is there going to be funds tied to ensuring or gaining participation from agencies? And I understand it's the information requested is not to add to an agency's ability to draw data, but is there grant funding that we are going to authorize or make available to smaller agencies that just don't have the resources or the infrastructure to glean this data from their agencies?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mr. Clark. That's an important question. And one of the things we talked about on this council, and one of the things I've let Justice Counts know from the beginning, in these agencies, you just don't have a data person. Even if you have the information, you don't have the person to extract it and to gather it. So when it comes to additional support that we are offering the agencies, there's not a specific grant. The Justice Counts effort is funded by BJA grants. And by us being a founding state for Justice Counts, they will help provide that technical support. So our hope, if there is an agency that when you're ready to participate, we can just sign up and send us the opt-in form, and then we will meet with you and tell us how it works. Tell us how your system works. Tell us what you do have, and then we will put in a plan in place to see what we can do. And then the next part of that would be my agency. This is where we exist to help with data and to gather it. And where I'm hoping is we can help fill in those gaps. So if we have a conversation and learn about how the systems work, maybe it's the agency is just able to run the report and send it to us, and we'll aggregate it and clean it and then send it back to the agency to make sure it works. So right now, there isn't any additional grant funding that we'd recommend other than utilizing this amazing support from Justice Count's team, who will come in and sit with us, and we're going to sit side by side, and then my staff. And we've already started to work out that arrangement with some of the other agencies, that we're working out what data they're going to send to us, and then we'll take care of it from there. And so we really want to emphasize not putting extra work on everybody. And maybe what's the most valuable thing that comes out of our conversation is we just learn. We learn about your data system, and then maybe later on we can help you find funding for those other efforts.
Any other? Yes, Mr. DeMar.
The $3 million that comes out of the general fund, do we have a budget for that?
Victoria Gonzalez, the record, could you clarify, so that money that requested for the appropriation, just to clarify, what's your question?
Right. In the beginning, you said that we would, for this effort, have $3 million that would be coming from the general fund.
So what? So the 3 million.
My question is, do we have a budget for that $3 million?
So when that is appropriated, so we're hoping that the legislature approves that and then appropriates it. And if we are granted that funding, it's to be used, the council will administer that money to give grants out for programs and treatment that will reduce recidivism. So it's not that there's a budget for it, it's just that then what the council will do is solicit requests for grants, and then the money based on the request can be approved or adjusted based on what funds are available to fund programming that will reduce recidivism. So it's not quite related to this.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding this topic? I have one question for Justice Counts. I noticed you referred to it as Tier 1 data. Would my assumption be correct that there is Tier 2 data? And if so, what is Tier 2?
Maddie, you want me to take that one? Okay. Yeah, so this is Tier 1. And when we were looking at all of the metrics, we realized we wanted to have something that was foundational and critical, that was like really the baseline of data. So that's really Tier 1. And that was constrained by that feasibility and usability kind of dual test. So Tier 2 is currently in development. So there's a very, very large consensus building process that is underway. So we're hoping between 20 and 25 new metrics will be added to each sector for Tier 2. And so we really lower the threshold for feasibility and focus more on the importance of data for that particular piece. So at the end of January, we'll be launching a public comment period for the Tier 2 metrics so that folks can weigh in and say, you know what, I do think that's exactly the most important things, or I would actually add these 3 as more important than anything else that folks have come up with so far. And then we'll reconcile those, and Tier 2 will be released in May of 2023 to add on to Tier 1. So, and that again will be something that agencies could always choose if they want to just focus on Tier 1 and get that foundational layer of data out, or if they wanted to just, shoot for the moon and do everything that was available, they can choose to do that as well.
Any other questions or items of concern for Justice Counts? All right, I am not seeing any other additional questions. That will close out agenda item number 6. I want to thank Justice Counts for their help and participation in their explanation of the data they're seeking to collect in the manner in which we'll actually be able to see the data. So thank you very much for that. That will take us to agenda item number 7, which is discussion of potential topics and dates for future meetings. The dates for the meetings for the rest of the year are provided in the agenda. Our next meeting will be February 1st, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. And then we will meet again on May 10th, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. and August 2nd, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. Our staff is already working on more topics and items for discussion, which will obviously include the administration of grants on how to do that, what we should do, and how we're going to set forth parameters to do that. But at this time, I would like to know if anyone has any items that they wish to be considered for future topics, either for training purposes, discussion at any of our next meetings. If you have any of those, please let me know now. All right, I'm not seeing any hands up or unmuted mics. So also, should you think of anything between now and our next meeting, go ahead and email Director Gonzalez and we can make sure to start the discussion on those items and get everything on our meetings that we need to ensure that we're efficiently using our time. All right, I think now that will close out item number 7 and take us to our last period of public comment. I will now open the second period of public comment. Just as we did during the first period of public comment, those who wish to testify may do so by telephone. Due to time constraints, public comment is limited to 2 minutes. Any members of the public that exceed the 2-minute limit may submit any written testimony in writing to the Department of Sentencing Policy at sentencingpolicy@ndsp.nv.gov. At this time, I will ask staff to manage and direct those who wish to testify. Mr. Sepulveda.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the public who would like to testify by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. When it's your turn to speak, please slowly state and spell your first and last name. We currently don't have anyone on the call.
All right. Thank you. That'll conclude item number 8, which was our second period of public comment. As I mentioned earlier, at our next meeting, we'll approve our prior minutes back from our last meeting in May, and the minutes from this meeting will be included there. And I imagine you'll be getting a series of emails following this meeting regarding justice counts and other points of data that we look to be collecting. Again, and very seriously, if you guys find or think of anything that you would like us to consider, especially even if it's a specific item as it pertains to administration of grants, for any of those that have great experience administration of grants, any information that you would like shared with the general group, we would like to know about so that we can make sure that at our next meeting, we're able to set forth adequate parameters and the manner in which we should go forward with the hope that we will receive an appropriation from the legislature. So this time I want to thank you all for coming today, taking time out of your schedules to be here. And I look forward to seeing you all in February, and our meeting is now adjourned.